Hello, everyone. It's me, Ian. And as you can tell from the title of this episode, that we are reposting a episode from our back catalog. And before anybody starts to get nervous or starts to freak out, no, Stoney did not get hurt. He's doing fine. Everything's great. Unfortunately, though, there was some personal things that happened for Stoney and for Jason, and I will let them speak on that whenever they're here. And so with that, as well as work stuff and, schedules and, us trying to keep things in the balance, we weren't able to come together to record for this week. So that's why we decided on reposting another episode. The episode that I've chosen was released a couple of months ago, so it's still very recent, but I think it's going to keep in theme and in line with one of our future episodes we have coming up that we have planned that I think is going to be in that same kind of conspiracy theory kind of space. Each one of us here appreciate you all for being understanding that sometimes life happens, and that's okay. I hope everyone out there is doing well, and I wish the best for everyone. Thank you for sticking with us through everything. I hope you enjoy listening back to this episode. Thank you. Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And Stoney.
Hello.
How's it going, guys?
Oh, good.
Anything fun happen with you guys?
Well, I mean, today was my, I've been wanting to actually incorporate a little resistance training in my exercise routines. I've always been somewhat of, just a runner.
Right.
And I used to be an avid weightlifter for 30 years, so I'm not no stranger to that world.
Right.
I was quite invested and quite deep in it. But I kind of got away from it now for the last, really probably since COVID.
Yeah.
When the gym started closing and just you get out of just kind of your old routine. And and I had just gotten too big. And I wanted to do a little running and, having all that weight, doesn't help the knees trying to run. So I kind of just went into running. And so I've shed a lot of my muscle mass that I once had. But I need to kind of get a little bit more of that involved. So I actually joined a CrossFit. It's a 7-day trial. I'm going to try it out.
Okay.
And see what this is all about. I went for my first workout this morning at 8:30.
Okay. I heard they whoop you pretty good. At
it's it was a good workout. It was some chest and some chest movements and some trying to think, burpees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I hate those.
I have some friends that do CrossFit, and I have some friends that formerly did CrossFit.
Yeah.
And the friends that are still doing it enjoy it because the body grows and gets better with differences, with changes. And then the friends that don't do it anymore say it's more like a cult-like status.
Well,
and it's the attitude of a cult.
I think at one time, I remember CrossFit, and I was always suspect of some of the movements of CrossFit. And even now, I will be very selective on certain things I do. But simply because of my age and just my body can't handle
I'm sure as you get into it, if there's an instructor or manager or owner that would like to come onto the show,
absolutely.
Maybe we could dissect the
maybe
CrossFit.
Talk about CrossFit.
Maybe we could dissect it a little bit.
I think I've talked to the owner today, and I'll give it some time and try it. And I may sign up for a month and try to get the full experience of some of the different types of classes. That's more what I was interested in than just going to a gym to work out,
right.
And I at this point, I need somebody to kind of give me some direction in my workout So that's why I'm doing
A couple
that.
of my friends that still do it, that's what they enjoy about it, is it's something different all the time.
Right.
It's not a routine. So if you go into it, and I guess early on, you didn't know what the instructors were going to have you doing. You just flat didn't know. Now it may be a little bit different. They may kind of plan it ahead.
They post the day before at 4:30. You got a little app that you look up and you see the workout for the next day. But I told them, I said, look, I'm gonna be sprinkling this through my running days because I run on Tuesdays and Fridays, and so I'll probably be doing a little workout on Mondays and Wednesdays, and maybe a Thursday, but I don't know. I don't want to push it too much,
Right.
but we'll see. And but I need to get my strength back, and to kind of combat, as you age, muscle loss starts occurring. So
really, I
Yeah.
hadn't noticed.
So I'm gonna try to do that. I'm just a new little endeavor here, so I'm gonna see how it goes.
Well, keep us up to date. And like I said, if you get somebody like our next week's guest is going to be somebody that I ran into, and we'll be talking about wellness and peace.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we can do, and maybe you can use some of what we're talking about there to help get your body in.
I got to get it. I want what I'm aiming for is functional fitness.
Okay,
Right.
So the days of being able to bench 300 pounds and 500-pound squats and 500-pound deadlifts, those are long over for me. In my younger days, yes.
You
but
just so
not
basically
now.
you're saying you want to be able to get out of the bed without throwing your back out.
I want to fight the aging process the best I can, and I just kind of want something that just incorporates a little bit of resistance training in my typically aerobic type activity. So,
Right.
Nice. It'll see what happens, and I've been excited. It was a good workout this morning. I'm sure I will feel it.
Oh, yeah, at some point.
Matter of fact, I even got a text from him. So, how you feeling? I'm like, well, right now I feel pretty good, but tomorrow morning we'll see how that plays out, because it was like, as I was doing some of these things, like I hadn't done burpees in a few years.
They were different.
So it was like I did a ton of them when I was involved with Spartan.
Mm-hmm.
But burpees, God, man, those are tough.
Yeah.
Well, when this episode airs, I will be, thank God, one day shy of 60.
Okay. There you go.
So, yep.
60 years
60.
old.
And after the last 2-year birthday celebrations,
Yeah.
both in ICU at the hospital, Miranda Hottie Doctor is watching me very careful right now, and she's not letting me do very much, and she's got that whip and that tight leash on me.
Keeping you in line.
Keeping me in line so I don't do anything stupid.
Well, that's good. That's good. You have somebody looking out
That's
for
right.
you.
Love it. Not complaining.
That's right.
That is not a complaint. She helped get me to 60, because had it not been for her, I probably wouldn't have been there. So, but yes, I will be 60 tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. So, wow.
Fun time, dude.
Man.
What about you, Ian?
I just went over to New Orleans and saw a music artist that I have been a big fan of for many, many years. And the last time he was even in the Louisiana area was, a handful of years ago, when I think I was actually out of the country in Canada. And so whenever I got the email that he was going to be, a short travel away from us, I was like, oh man, I really want to go. And Mallory has kind of fallen in love with him as well as Alan Stone. And we both went to go see that show, and it was so good. It was everything that I wanted. The only thing that was kind of a problem was in the venue we were at, the AC had broken. And they thought they could have gotten it up, but they couldn't quite get it operational. So they had like some fans and things like that were circulating some air, but was it hot in there with, close to 200 people in that room. So it was crazy. But yeah, that was a fun time. And I really liked going out to New Orleans. So
Where do you normally park?
They have like there's like a public like parking lot that's like at least for me has always been pretty reputable. They keep a close eye on the cars and are not afraid to boot you if they need to. And they got like ways that you can like mobile pay to get the boot off. It's crazy, but like they got a lot of new stuff, whatever. And there's always like security / like police officers in that area, which I feel pretty confident in. I know I tried to be too worried about it, but you know, again, whenever I have Mallory around me, I'm like, I don't want to just go, park on the side of the road somewhere, or
Right.
be somewhere suspicious. So I think it was about a block or two.
And where was this place in New Orleans, you said?
It was at the House of Blues.
House of Blues, okay.
Yeah. So it was like the parking lot's like 2 blocks away from the venue, and I was like, and we were both okay with walking there. So it was not that bad.
As long as your car is secure.
Exactly. And actually we took her car, so even more so. I was like, I don't want to keep her car safe. So yeah. And again, in the grand scheme of things, for how much I've paid for parking, like it wasn't too bad. I've paid an astronomical amount for a parking garage that was really sketchy, and this was, I think, a little bit cheaper than that. So,
okay,
it's good stuff. Like I said, I don't go like over to New Orleans a whole lot, but it's like I said before. I like to visit. I like to go out over there and go see it real fast, and maybe spend a day or so if you see all the sights, hit up all the restaurants and all that. For that night, we just went there for the concert. We got to see some of the just kind of walked around a little bit. Wasn't too bad, but I like to visit and then.
I lived in New Orleans. I lived in the Quarter. I lived 1 block off of Jackson Square.
Yeah,
and I loved it. And
it's
a different feel back then. This is not the same New Orleans. The French Quarter is definitely not the same.
Right.
It is, like you said, it's great to visit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would live in the Quarter again, and that was probably my favorite place to live that I've ever been, was in the Quarter. I was there when the Pope came.
Yep. 84, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, 84, something like that. It's a long time ago. I'm almost 60. Cut me some slack. With brain damage.
Yeah.
But it was amazing.
I bet.
To live there. And just, like you said, just go experience the music and the atmosphere, and it's just not the same anymore.
Yeah.
When I met Miranda, we went down there, and it's like, I'm carrying. I got my extra gun. I got my knife. Yeah. I got my extra knife. I got my extra magazine. I got my 2 extra magazines, and it's like, it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
It kind of looks the same.
To me, that's an easy fix if the political leaders really wanted to fix it.
Right.
And you have to have the will to do that. And of course, that's a subject for another discussion.
A whole subject.
That's a whole different ball game there than what we're going to be talking about. But I think we've all talked about what are the problems, and it's not just New Orleans. I mean, you can name any major metropolitan area that has.
Well, they're calling Baton Rouge New Orleans North now. So
I mean, right now the way the shootings are going right now, and it's a shame. I don't know what the fix is for that. Unless people are willing to just do what they got to do to fix that, and kind of turn the blind eye and say, look, we got to get order. Back in the streets again. Otherwise, you don't have a functional city at all.
Right.
You really don't. So, yeah, well,
like you said,
that's something to discuss at another time.
Right. What we got on the dock for today?
Well, I was watching a documentary on television not long ago. I've always been fascinated with the Sphinx of Egypt. It is such an incredible monument that just kind of blows my mind a little bit of what could be built
right
back then. that today to build something like that would be a massive, major endeavor with modern equipment.
They don't believe you could build the pyramids with today's technology.
Exactly. And I mean, just a few facts. And I kind of want to just kind of lay the groundwork of kind of what's the conventional understanding of the Sphinx and why it was built, or what the Egyptologists say why it was built, and so on.
Now, I'm old, but don't they believe that was built at the time of the second pyramid? I don't remember. I'm asking.
It was built. Well, the problem is they really don't know when it was built.
Was it Gaddafi or not Gaddafi? Coffee or something like that?
Khafre.
Khafre,
Supposedly during the Fourth Dynasty. That's the conventional Egyptologists will tell you it was built during the Fourth Dynasty during the reign of Khafre, around from 2603 to 2578 BC, somewhere up in that era, which would be about 4,600 years ago. But just kind of let everybody know, and these are just some facts of the Sphinx, that it's the world's oldest monumental structure.
Really?
I thought
Right
the
now.
pyramids were.
No, it's
Because
not.
it was built, supposedly, if it was Khafre, he built the second pyramid.
Well, it's the largest monolithic statue on Earth.
Now that I knew.
Okay.
That I knew.
And
oldest.
Thutmose IV supposedly rediscovered it after falling asleep on it, because for most of its history, it's been buried under the sand.
Right.
Really?
It's only been...
It's really only until the 20s and 30s that actually, I think it was in the late 30s, a team of an Egyptian geologist and his team was able to successfully extricate it out of the sand.
Oh my God.
For the most part, it literally was just this thing sticking up out of the sand, the head part.
Wow.
And so it was been buried for most of its history, because the sands are always doing its work on it. So, but as I said, built during the fourth dynasty, and I'm kind of quoting kind of the conventional the archaeology and the Egyptologists, what they say when it was built. And this is where most of your mainstream people will tell you this is kind of where it needs to be. It's 66 feet high and 240 feet long.
62 wide.
And it was supposedly why it was built, they say it was guardian of the pyramids.
Right. And there's some symbolism in the head and the body. The lion's body and human head is supposed to symbolize strength and intelligence. And it like you said, it's supposed to protect. And this is why I keep coming back to the second pyramid. It's supposed to guard the pyramids and the pharaoh's tombs.
Right.
So if it came before the pyramids, it's not really guarding anything.
Right.
But if
Now,
it was built at the second one, you kind of see where they were
it
planning
was
something.
so Khufu, who is Khafre's father,
Right.
is responsible for building the Great Pyramid of Giza. Supposedly, the son built this as the way of guarding his father's
legacy.
tomb.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's some symbolism there. And
So think about that. Okay, this is a father and a son, and we couldn't do it today using modern technology in a father and son's generational period of time. Couldn't do it. Couldn't build it today.
Well, I think people thought a little differently back then, and everything. But not to say we couldn't build. And we've kind of touched on this in other episodes of if people could think about what we could accomplish,
Right.
if we put aside our conflicts as a world, combine our resources, and truly build megalithic type structures.
If you were to put in context the modern way of contracting out workers and facilitating that, you're right, we couldn't do it. But if you throw all that away and you have however hundreds of people that are probably slave laborers,
thousands of people,
that work all day,
yeah.
all night, and regardless if you're injured or not, there's no workman's comp. Like you're just like like,
Right,
I
yeah.
can imagine a lot of stuff could be done. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but some of these stones
You're right.
are built in such a way, cut in such a way that you can't slip a dollar bill through them. We couldn't do that today. We couldn't even cut the stones today, let alone put them together.
Yeah, it's
And the pyramids today don't look like they did back then.
Oh yeah.
They were finished. They were beautiful. There
Right.
was gold tops. It's not even close.
Well, as I said, that's once again you're getting into why they were built, if they were built by the Egyptians,
If I like that word.
because there's a lot of information coming out that suggests that just maybe the current dating on that whole Giza plateau might be in error. And so now your mainstream Egyptologists and archaeologists will argue this point and say there's no evidence of them being older than what has been dated before. They can't go back more than 5,000 years because there's really no civilization to do that. But it's interesting that a person, actually this goes back to the 30s, and which kind of prompted all this sort of change in thinking with the pyramids and with Sphinx, more so with Sphinx more than the pyramids. There in the 30s, it was a French philosopher, Schwaller de Lubix, and he noted that the weathering on the Sphinx indicated water erosion. Now, he's the first person to really broach this idea,
Right.
which flies in the face of, everybody saying, why in the world, how could there be water erosion on the Sphinx? Because there was no rain of that magnitude falling in the Saharan region at that time period.
Right.
So the question is then, okay, that opens up a little bit of a Pandora's box,
Right.
so to speak. So how do you go about figuring this out? You can't just explain away the water erosion. Now, there has been some attempts. I think I read something that the New York Post reported something, that there was a article published. If I can find it in here in my notes real quick, it was published in a journal called Physical Review Fluids. They actually suggested that the life of the Sphinx actually began as a solid piece of rock, and the wind actually eroded it to a point that it kind of resembled its figure. And then the Egyptians saw it and said, okay, let's carve something out of it. Okay, so that's a possible, that's kind of the latest stuff I saw. That is possibly dates it to about that same period. Now, it still makes the date of the Sphinx older, but it's just a natural feature. It was just a natural rock coming out of the ground.
But you see, if we look at it in the context like what Ian said, if you had unlimited people, if you had this amount, if you had no workman's comp, could they have built this, or could they have carved it? Possibly. Or could they have uncovered it and claimed it as their own? Now, you see, I believe that. I believe you could have had this little top, like you said. At one time, it was just part of the head. Maybe you saw only part of the pyramid, and these pharaohs came in and said, I got enough people, let's start digging. Now, I believe that. I believe they could have done that back then. And we've talked about ancient civilizations before, and what if this came from another time?
Well,
and they uncovered it and moved the sand, and poof, this is ours.
That's the argument. I mean, that's some of the latest stuff, and there's been some increasing, archaeological evidence that indicates that there's a lot of water erosion there, and that then places the construction of this thing probably dating back to the end of the Pleistocene period, which is the last of the Ice Age.
Right.
Which is about 12 to 9,000 BC.
Which would have had a lot of water coming down because of all the ice melting, which could have caused the erosion.
Well, we refer to that period of time, we call that the Younger Dryas period. And there's been a lot of talk about the Younger Dryas period. All the megafauna got wiped out during this time. Obviously, they say solar event occurred that a massive coronal ejection that caused some massive weather changes on planet Earth. When the ice caps started melting at an extreme rate, a lot of moisture gets pumped in the atmosphere. There's tons and tons of rainfall. There's flooding occurring. Seas are beginning to rise. And I'm kind of the opinion that I personally think a lot of the flood stories that come from these cultures. We all know the Noahic story of Noah and the flood, but there are flood stories throughout the world. Every culture has one. And that lends me to believe that there is a common cultural memory of some tragic time that occurred at some point in our past. And so these stories get told as, in the case of Noah, God didn't like what he saw and he sent the flood to wipe out. Or in some of these other cultures, the gods get angry or whatever the case may be. Regardless, there's some devastating flood that occurs. Only a few people are left. And some of these people bring civilization to some of these primitive people. I mean, we think of ourselves now in our modern world. We would consider ourselves fairly civilized, high civilization. You got learning, you got machines, you can fly, you can do all the things that the modern world gives us. But there are plenty of people in the world that live very, very primitive cultures. Live in very primitive cultures. And they absolutely have no understanding of our world whatsoever. But unfortunately, if our world got wiped out in some devastating apocalypse, if you want, for lack of a better term, who are the people best equipped to survive it?
Yeah.
It's going to be those primitive people who are used to doing it every day.
Right.
So what would happen? How would I go to some of those people and explain to them what we once created, what we had? And so I think in many ways, I've come to the conclusion in many ways that I believe that the pyramids and the Sphinx, especially the Sphinx, is actually older. And I believe the Egyptians inherited that they're a legacy civilization, which means there was a previous high culture that was able to build these structures in such a way that once they got wiped out, for all intents and purposes, their world got destroyed. Thousands of years go by. And all of a sudden, a little bit of that knowledge was picked up by the successor generations that happened.
But also, somebody from one of our past episodes, Edgar Casey, one of his things was he believes that underneath the Sphinx is the Hall of Records containing the information from the lost civilization of Atlantis.
That's right.
Which was supposedly before all of this, too. So, you know.
Atlantis was supposedly destroyed when? At the end of the Younger Dryas.
But also
9 to 12,000 years
here's
ago.
a fun fact, and everybody is speculating. This is one of the speculations of all this. That time also was when, now we just had the solar eclipse make the big X. Remember, they talked about that, and within a couple of years, there was a big earthquake, and that's happened a couple of times. But that time you're talking about also happened at a time where the sun's polarity changed.
Oh, they say it was a solar event.
Oh, yes. Guess what's fixing to happen again in our lifetime? The sun's polarity is fixing to change.
Well,
again, in conjunction with the solar eclipses making their big X across, what is it, Springfield, Missouri or something?
Yeah, we talked about that.
And another podcast, but now that's fixing to happen again. How interesting is the time we're living in right now? Because some of those same things are fixing to happen again.
Well, it's often how these things were built, with definitely the celestial bodies involved in their of the building. Like, for example, the Sphinx faces east. It directly faces east, and if I remember right, it ties into the cycle of the 26,000 year cycle of what they call precession. Matter of fact, they have found in Egypt some of the same things that we associate with our modern day zodiac. So the knowledge of this goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years back. Matter of fact, the Greeks got their stuff actually from Egypt. Matter of fact, when Plato was talking about, you talk about Atlantis. It's so funny. Plato talks about a teacher of his named Solon who went to Egypt, and the Egyptians said that Atlantis went under the sea about 9,000 to 12,000 years ago, which is all ties into this end of the Younger Dryas, the melting of the ice caps. It's documented now that seas are 400 feet higher than they were then. You think about how much coastline is now underwater.
Right.
That we have no idea. And guess where people lived? They lived on the coast. So any civilization they may have, it's gone.
100% gone. Yep.
And people say, well, we haven't found any evidence of that. Well, I mean, 10,000 years is a long time for stuff to disappear. That's far enough time for basic to wipe out any evidence, unless there are some few megalithic structures that may still be around that would give evidence of these civilizations that once existed. And that's so funny. And I'm going to tell you, of course, when I first read about all this stuff, and I've been following this stuff for some time,
I would like to add a note. This, the conversation right here, is what brought Jason to this show. We used to have these conversations every day at work, and I love it. I'm glad we're back into this mode here. This is awesome.
But I find it interesting that we have gotten to a point that you have people that are so fixated on the Fourth Dynasty with this. When the evidence that it was even built by Khafre is very circumstantial.
It's dwindling also. Yes.
It's not like this slam dunk yes. Believe me, it's a guess. They're speculating because they don't want to think of anything before 5000 BC because they don't believe nothing existed. That's where I feel like where they kind of close their mind. And that's what people like Graham Hancock and John Anthony West and even Robert Schoch, which to me, when John Anthony West kind of following the kind of the work of that French philosopher I just mentioned, he went to John Anthony West and said, hey, can you kind of look at this stuff? That's when John Anthony West said, look, there is water erosion here. And it's only water erosion that comes from rain, not from flooding from the Nile, because that leaves a completely different geologic mark than actual very intense rainfall. Matter of fact, I'm going to quote exactly what he said of what John Anthony West. Now, I will say, in all fairness, there are many critics of Robert Schoch.
Mm-hmm.
He's very alone in this among his colleagues, which, considering how academia is funded,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine people are probably scared to think that maybe they got it wrong.
Well, think about
You
this.
know,
Also, a whole
I mean-
civilization. Egyptians don't want somebody coming and proving that they weren't the great civilization that built the Sphinx and the pyramids and everything else. Because if you prove it was an ancient, older civilization, then you kind of wipe out their whole
The whole premise.
It's gone. You know, now
Puts a lot of things into question.
yeah, a lot, and that's a big thing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's where they're fighting it so much, and
Well,
that's why. What's it? How Hawaii or whatever doesn't allow just anybody into Egypt anymore. You have to go through him to even, dig a pebble up now.
He goes, it says, upon viewing the erosion on the Sphinx's body, Schoch was immediately convinced it had to be much older than previously assumed. He described the erosion as having undulated, vertical, coved, rounded like a cove fissures. Schoch perceived that this non-inform erosion could only have been caused by the way of rainfall falls vertically, eroding the limestone in vertical strips over time. Incidentally, this erosion was found on the body and not on the head, which that's another issue, suggesting the head had been recarved in more recent time, which I think it's definitely because the head doesn't even look in proportion to what the body is of the whole structure. Beyond these surface level observations, Schoch, in collaboration with geophysicists named Thomas DeBecke, discovered the same erosion patterns below the surface of the bedrock when they conducted seismic experiments. They even found the same kind of erosion beneath newer limestone blocks on the Sphinx that had served as repairs. Schoch said, "My initial estimate of the Sphinx's original build was on the order of several millennia prior to the onset of the current hyper-arid Sahara conditions. Using the subsurface seismic data, this estimate is confirmed. I am currently of the opinion that the core body of the Great Sphinx dates back to before the end of the last ice age, that is, before 9700 BC.
And I was looking it up, and it looks like the ancient Egyptian was like 3200 BC.
Exactly.
That's 5,000 years before any of that, give or take.
Exactly.
Which is crazy to think about.
That's right. Because now you're talking about you're rewriting human origins, how long we've been on this planet, and how long we've kind of looked like us and acted like us.
If we're talking about like potentially evolution and things like that, like when was I can't remember which version of Homo
well, there was Homo, talking about Homo sapien, then I think there was Homo erectus.
Yeah. There's a couple of them, but
it was Neanderthal, And
there's the missing link in there somewhere.
Well, they're showing they showed some evidence that there was that Neanderthals made it with modern day Homo sapiens, and they have found evidence of that in some genetic pools of Neanderthal DNA.
The part that I was trying to the point that I was trying to, I guess, kind of get to was like how long ago was that?
What?
And compare like that kind of time like before Ice Age stuff.
Well, you have to go back and look at when the last Ice Age began. I think it began somewhere around 20,000. You may have to just do a search on it. When I think it's 20 to 50,000 BC.
The hypothetical I was kind of talking about was the fact that the last glacial period began about 100,000 years ago and lasted until 25,000 years ago. So it was a full...
Yeah, that's a long time.
Full 75,000 years. The point that I was trying to say was, like, let's say if we're talking about this from the perspective of the ancient Egyptian was about 3,000 BC, and we're 2,000 years before that, so that's 5,000 years ago. And then if you talk about, like, they're saying that the end of the last ice age was 9,000.
The end of it, right?
So right. So that could be from right now,
9 to 12,000 years ago.
Right.
They kind of how you date geology. I mean,
and the point that I'm trying to say is that if the last ice age ended, or sometime around 25,000 years ago, like there's a whole span of time between like when the Egyptians were like,
when they were basically what we would consider a civilization.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you'd have to look at kind of how anthropology and how groups merge and evolve into something that we would consider a modern day civilization. Where, I mean, there are markers that you look at. You look at probably pottery. You look at evidences of fine tools and communicate.
Yeah, right.
Where there's where you're not, all you're doing is just running around hunting animals, and that's your whole existence. Because you have to have for a civilization to exist, there you have to get to a level where you can actually have other classes of people,
right?
Where not everybody's it's all about just survival, So
are you hypothesize that there was a pre-Egyptian kind of
I believe that there was I believe human civilization has evolved,
right,
and was destroyed and being rebuilt. And I think that we go in cycles.
Right.
I mean, we're getting to a point now, well, there'll be another disaster on Earth. And we've kind of talked about those things in other episodes. Yes, there are things that can wipe us out or bring us back to the Stone Age. And it would take thousands of years to rebuild our world, from where we were. But for people who are primitive already, they wouldn't skip a beat. They'd still go out there and hunt and fish and do what they got to do and then, people would come around, and who knows, maybe somebody like us would show up on the seashore and say, we're going to talk about what the gods once built.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm just trying to convey the idea of what
it's interesting.
Of how that would be viewed.
Right.
For a very primitive culture. What we have now, a jetliner flying to the moon, would be the stuff of the gods.
Right.
They would be.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, so, and I know, I don't want to freak people out. And people get all, with their religion, and somehow if the world ain't just 6,000 years old, and it didn't happen step the way the first 10 chapters of Genesis that we're familiar with. I believe we're a little bit more nuanced than that, and I don't subscribe to kind of a literalistic view of those first 10 chapters of Genesis, which you got to be careful with that.
Yeah,
I have an interesting statistic.
That's a whole different ball game.
A whole nother one. To erode 1 millimeter per year of limestone in erosion would take 1,000 years. So you would have to multiply that times how many millimeters have actually been eroded.
Right.
Which they're saying could take almost 100,000 years to erode.
Oh, I'm a firm believer that that there was probably a thriving civilization for thousands of years.
Well,
and
you think before the first ice or the first?
I personally think that it was around long enough to evolve to a state that it could circumvent the globe.
Oh, really?
Yes, that it could circumvent the globe. That it had ships that could go, because they've found evidence of cultures in other parts of the world. That's
and
like how they even get there if they didn't know about this.
Possible dimensional travel, because some of these things they believe the pyramids all over the earth or they've traveled.
I mean, look at what they found in South America.
Mm-hmm.
The Olmecs.
Yeah.
Well, you know about the Olmecs. You look at those statues.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look like South Americans. They look like they're from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They have African features.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's some cross contact with other cultures around the world. And then on top of that, all of a sudden the big discovery happened. Because everybody was saying, well, there's nothing could be done prior to 5000 BC.
Mm-hmm.
There was no civilization that could build because everybody was just doing nothing but hunting and gathering.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have a level of sophistication to be able to put these large-scale objects together. Well, lo and behold, guess what happens? We find things. And here are some things that I found that was very interesting that I think our listeners would appreciate hearing.
Mm-hmm.
In 1994, Göbekli Tepe was discovered in southeastern Turkey. The oldest megalithic structure ever found, dated to be as old as 10,000 BC.
Get out.
The existence of this site adds weight to the prospect that a highly advanced prehistoric culture lived at least 11 to 12,000 years ago, even though it's not the same prehistoric culture.
So the thing I'm also kind of confused about too is like, do you think that prehistoric civilization potentially didn't have any way of like writing down like history in some way, or was it just? Do you think that's also kind of washed away?
Well, even our Native Americans didn't have written history; they had stories.
Right.
It was word of mouth. Maybe it wasn't.
The thing is, I mean, could there have been written records? Who knows? But it depends on how they would record things.
Right.
We record things on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Now we record things electronically, but that can be destroyed.
Absolutely.
Right.
In a heartbeat.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even paper. I mean, look what they have to do to keep paper documents preserved. Otherwise, they would just shrivel up and blow away. I mean, it just...
Or burn, like the library in Alexandria.
Here's...
They said
like,
it's possible the wetter climate conditions from approximately 10,000 to 5,000 BC could have possibly provided the necessary environment for such erosion to take, supporting the hypothesis that it may be older than traditionally believed. But then think about that. It would have still had to have been built before 10,000 BC.
That's right. You would have to have that before that.
Right. That's
You would have had to have all that in place before the cataclysm that occurred at that time. And here's another one. Malta is home to 7,000-year-old prehistoric temples such as Hagar Kim and Menadra, Mnajdra, that have archaeologists baffled by the accuracy with which they were constructed and their precise astronomical alignments in an age when the wheel hadn't even been discovered yet.
Ooh.
So that's what I'm saying. So my question is, if they're saying, well, there can't be anything past 5,000 BC, but yet they're finding these things on other parts of the globe that are now dating back to this time period, how do you explain that away? I mean, you had to have a group of people to be able to build that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just can't simply say they were all just running around killing animals and that's all they were doing. You would had to have a society to be able to develop, to even contemplate building something like this.
Or somebody helping them.
Oh, they could have somebody helping
them
him.
And bringing that information and directing them what to do.
Yeah, and they got other prehistoric sites in Sardinia and Turkey that, in addition to the ones I said. So they're beginning to find these things. And so that's why I have always felt that really, I think we've been on this planet longer than what they say we have in our current form.
State, yes.
And I think this idea that somehow a bunch of Neanderthals could just kind of run around and build these megalithic structures, I think you're stretching. And the reality is they really don't know either. They're speculating because they can't find any evidence of an older civilization.
Or
Right.
they don't want to look at the evidence.
They don't want to go there.
Because the evidence is there.
Well, the problem is I would think a lot of that evidence is probably going to be underwater. And to be able to fund underwater archaeology is very expensive. And there's, where do you start?
Right.
Where do you start?
Well, think about this. We've explored more outer space
Than
than we
we
have
own
in our
ocean.
own oceans.
I can't imagine how much seashore would be visible if the water was 400 feet shallower.
And how much more would be sticking out?
Think
how
about
big
that.
would Cuba be? Think about that. Just Cuba alone.
All those islands. Think of the little islands.
It would
New
be
Zealand.
It would be a new continent.
Be new continents. That would not be. You've all heard of Doggerland. All that area around the North Sea.
Yep.
They found that. They found all that when they were. I think they had an anchor, brought up some peat humus or whatever, some grasses and stuff like this. Oh, how does it in the middle of the ocean? Come to find out, that was land at one time.
And then think about it as well. You got hundreds and thousands of years of erosion as well on coastlines potentially, or sand.
Yeah,
Well, think about how
nature
long
doesn't
did it
stop.
take to erode out the Grand Canyon. That wasn't 10 or 15 years.
Oh yeah.
That was a long time. So this has been going on a long time. And I agree with Jason. I don't think we're the first ones here in our form or state that we are. And I lend to the what was the memory thing, you've said it before, and here comes my brain damage again, where the memories are kind of genetically passed on or something. What did you call it before? Crap.
It's just you were talking about that when I was talking about the flood and that collective memory.
Yes.
That some event, some traumatic event basically every culture experienced and recorded that in their own way,
Right.
in their own culture, how they explained it. But obviously something happened. I'm a firm believer that we definitely experienced a disaster of epic proportions. I can't even. Because we lost all the megafauna, all the woolly mammoth, saber-toothed cats, the giant sloth, all these massive animals that a lot of them were running through North America at the time. The American lion.
Oh yeah.
That are gone now.
I hear they're bringing back the mammoth.
Oh,
They're going to tie the DNA into an elephant and see if they can't bring the mammoth back.
Well, I think the East Asian elephant is the closest relative to the mammoth. And so they're going to try to cross DNA with an East Asian elephant with what they've pulled out of some of these frozen carcasses to see if they can get across. Because I would love to see what a herd of woolly mammoths would look like. Because they were massive.
Wouldn't that be fascinating?
They were massive animals.
Would it even survive in this?
Well, most of them roamed, or basically Siberia is in the cold. I think some of them roamed in probably North America and toward the upper north in Canada. I think I read somewhere where they that used to be the range of them. Probably crossing the Bering Strait.
Yeah,
because you think about it, if the seas are 400 feet lower,
They could just
that's a
walk
land
across it.
bridge.
Yeah, land bridge.
That bridge is wide open now. It's just solid land, so you can go across it. So, yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, it's just, the Sphinx is now. There are crazy things that have been said.
Right.
There was a story that they found a chamber under the paw, and supposedly they won't allow anybody in there. I don't know. Could there be records there that supposedly that's where Plato said where evidence of Atlantis would be found.
Edgar Casey said the same
Edgar
thing.
Casey said the same thing. I don't know how people would think if they actually proved that there was once a high civilization that got wiped out. Does it mean our civilization can get wiped out?
Mm-hmm. Can I parlay this into something I learned recently about the Fermi paradox?
Yes.
The great filter stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of
Tie into a former episode.
A couple of former
past
episodes.
episode. Mm-hmm.
I learned recently, and I'm going to probably butcher the details because I didn't write it down, but we're talking about this now, and it reminded me of it, and I think it would be interesting to talk about, is that I won't bore you with all the details of the Fermi paradox or with the great filter stuff. If you want to learn more about that, we have an episode on it, or you can look it up. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into, supposedly, because of how quickly I believe radio waves emit in space and in the atmosphere and all that kind of stuff, that potentially, that from when we started radio broadcasting, the distance at which that has traveled is not very large at all in the grand scheme of the universe. So the fact that we haven't heard anything back yet is actually because like the distance of all that hasn't gone very far at all. And I think that like I learned about that recently from like a podcast that talked about the fact that the same thing would happen in the opposite, is that by the time we possibly hear radio waves from a different civilization, it will have been, potentially hundreds of thousands of years ago in their civilization. So the fact that there's probably another civilization that is also potentially broadcasting out radio waves to try and find another civilization, by the time we hear it, traveling through space, it's almost like, we're going to hear their version of like 1930s radio. We're like, oh, wow, we're hearing them. But it's actually like super old radio waves that haven't, all their more modern stuff hasn't even, come in contact with us yet. So like the same thing could be happening in reverse, where aliens could probably be hearing things that was broadcast, back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s or whatever.
Well, I mean, there have been people who have said that some of the things that are outlined, and I've read one article where they're saying like the things described in the book of Ezekiel is actually describing alien beings.
Okay.
With the wheels and
yeah,
weird,
right.
kind of that real flamboyant language that's used in Ezekiel.
Right.
Some say that was aliens.
Chariots of fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's some people say that, did our ancestors get help? Mm-hmm. We hear stories in the book of Enoch where, the Watchers descended down and taught mankind the secrets of weapons and charms and, basically increasing knowledge of things they were never meant to know. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this idea that, they could have these extraterrestrial beings or divine beings coming down and somehow interfering in human affairs and basically increasing our knowledge, I don't know. I don't necessarily. It's interesting to listen to, and I do read some of that, but I personally think that humankind on its own had enough time to be on this planet, evolve. Because I've read that. I mean, we've really been here for like 300,000 years. You think about 300. Just look at what we have done in our short time of where we've come from. Can you imagine what another 50,000 years of our society would evolve into?
Right.
Some say some of these kind of pivoting a little bit on this, but some say some of these aliens that supposedly are actually us.
Are actually us. Yes, traveling.
Or actually our future, what we would evolve into over time. because
I felt that. I would like
well,
to go
like,
in that direction.
yeah, the Greys, they saying that actually
That's us.
That was us, but that we evolved that way because a disaster hit. And it drove us underground, and it caused our bodies to change.
Or that we went more mental instead of physical because of the dimensional travel and things like that. Our brains developed and our bodies didn't. And because that's, the communication through, the mind. And
I mean, when you start getting into space time and trying to understand that the present is the past and the past is the present, and how all that kind of, it just kind of blows your mind.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. I get a headache sometimes thinking about it because it just, our brains only work linear, in a linear fashion.
Right.
We start at A and we go to Z.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we go to Z and go to A, but that's about the extent of it. But how all that works, who knows what we'll evolve into over time. But I kind of getting back to the point, 300,000 years is enough time for various societies to rise and to fall. And any evidence of them could be wiped out completely.
Right. Well, especially like you said, like what we were hypothesizing before, the fact that, an ice age comes through and, freezes over large portions of the planet. And,
Well, I remember somehow years ago, my little brother and I were talking about this, and he was saying that they do these large core samples of the Earth, and they can go down to where, like, every 15,000 years, there's a new ice age, a new solar event or something, and even the CO levels. We're talking about all this green Earth stuff. There's a huge cycle. I wish I'd known we to talk about that. I'd have got him to call in or something. Of all of this happens repeatedly anyway. There's really nothing we can do, and we're very, narcissistic to believe that we can affect the Earth other than launching multiple missiles or something. Right. That it's going to happen anyway. And these core samples showed that it's happened multiple times. And if we talk about the Great Filter and things like that, what if we've done this 10 or 15 times? Like Jason said, we've been here for 300,000 years, and we keep running into the same thing and don't fix it.
Well, in case of I don't think any of our ancestors, if a society did exist, what can you do to stop a massive coronal ejection, and all of a sudden temperatures rising quite rapidly and water's just pouring down everywhere,
right?
And you're basically just watching land disappear, and there's not a thing you can do about it because it's happening on a global scale. You don't have enough. We don't have enough things to stop that.
We don't have the power to probably fix that now.
We don't.
Right.
Think about it. Really, for all intents and purposes, we don't. It's...
Yeah.
We've talked about asteroids, and we could possibly maybe knock an asteroid off to prevent it from hitting. But if it did hit, what you going to do?
Right. Or let's say over the next couple of years, something ends up happening, or again, the coastline raises another 400 feet. We're all just going to come congregate
inward.
Yes,
I'm saying.
But like you said earlier, who would be ready to handle that?
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be us, because we need our internet, we need our electricity, we need our gasoline. Who could actually survive that?
Well, if something happens on a global scale, then you're in a territory that no one is prepared to deal with. Because, there's always somebody you can rely on to help. And when it comes to where there's no one coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And there's no one coming. And you're it. And you're just watching things get swallowed up. We're talking now at this time when I talk about flooding, we're talking about massive tsunamis coming across the land. There's just nothing you can do about that. I mean, we're talking about a disaster of
But that's what I'm saying. It's going to
biblical
wind up being
proportions
some
of
little
dealing-
bitty tribe somewhere up on a mountain
Exactly.
who that it couldn't
Those
reach.
are the
That's
one-
the person that's going to live and survive.
And guess what? Those cultures are going to be the ones recording,
right.
and passing
how do they
down-
tell the story?
Passing down their story of what the gods
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
once accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They flew to the stars.
Mm-hmm.
They flew across the sky and were able to construct wondrous things.
Because they can see the planes going over. They just don't know how
They
to
don't know
explain
how,
them.
They don't know how to explain that. But in their way, that's what would be passed down. And for people thousands of years later would have to interpret that.
And gets turned into a religion, gets
Right.
turned into a
It's-
society, and gets turned into
All
this, that, and that.
That's what I'm saying. It's I think you need to have a little bit of an open mind on this stuff and realize that maybe our past is a little bit more nuanced than what I think some people want to. Now, look, some people don't want to think about that.
Right.
They just don't. I mean, I got to worry about the here and now, and I don't care about what happened 15,000 years ago. I mean, I get it. I really do. But for the sake of the conversation,
I do think it's a fun topic, and you have mentioned this in passing to me a little bit, but we haven't had the chance to really dig into it. And I've never, like with everything, I haven't been like a full, skeptic on all of it. I'm like, to be honest, because again, I don't know if the world is, or the civilizations are younger or older than they say they are. But after hearing a lot of this stuff now, it's really interesting to see pictures of me, like I'm Googling like the Sphinx and like the different lines you're talking about of erosion. And it's not like little, I mean, we're talking like grooves look like they're eroded out of this stone structure. And it's like, I too am like, that looks a little questionable.
Right. You
it's
have
like,
to,
okay, yeah.
I mean, you ultimately have to ask the question, if in any case water eroded this,
Right.
when did the last time rain in such quantities that it could produce that?
Right.
When shock came up with that, and as I said, but
here's the thing: it hasn't been in our recorded history. It
Right.
was before that recorded history that there was enough rain. From the time the Egyptians and everybody was doing all this recorded stuff, there hasn't been that much rain. It was 10,000 and 15,000 years before our recorded history that there was enough rain to do that, if it was rain.
Right. I mean, it's some of this stuff is just it's incredible. I mean, it just really is. Like the Dentera Zodiac was discovered. The Dentera Zodiac is a map of the stars depicted in a disc with 36 zodiac-like animals, one for every 10 days. Animals familiar to the zodiac we know today can be seen on it, including a ram, Aries, a bull, Taurus, and a pair of scales, Libra, and a scorpion, Scorpio. So that's what I'm saying. How do these people know about this?
Right.
I mean, you have to kind of think, how did they even get to a point where I'm looking up at the sky and even coming up with this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that tells me that there's something going on there. There's some level of knowledge being imparted from another group of people to a less informed group of people and say, let me tell you about this.
Right.
And they would try to explain it in their own way.
But then how do you take those celestial bodies and put them on the earth in exact proportion? How did they do that?
We don't. That's what I'm saying. It's like in the Nabda Playa region, 500 miles south of Cairo, contains stone circles with precise astrological alignments, including the precession of the equinoxes. The site has been dated to 8,000 BC, adding credibility to the possibility of an advanced prehistoric culture in the area. You have to have a degree of sophistication to come up with this.
Not only that, but like you also the way I look at that sort of stuff is like you have to also have somebody, either one or two people that has looked at the stars enough to understand the cycle of how it works and then construct something out of it. Like one person could probably do that, but I look at it as like a master apprentice kind of thing, where it's like I've studied this, and then the apprentice is like, let's build this to like help.
Right, and you, as I said, you would have to be at a point where I've evolved beyond the ability that I've got to be a hunter gatherer.
Yeah.
Society has gotten to a point where people have time
to contemplate
contemplate that.
Space, yeah.
Because when you're basically day-to-day survival, you don't have time for that.
Right. What is the
you're not sitting
what is the name?
back.
The hierarchy of needs? I can't remember
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
You're not sitting there with a bone picking your teeth, looking up the stars going, ooh, a scorpion. Oh, wait, are there scorpions in your area?
Right.
Ooh, wow, a ram. Hey, look at that. That's not happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's possible to draw a straight line through the Sphinx temple, the Sphinx, and Khafre's pyramid. As Lerner observed, the sun mirrors this alignment twice every year on the equinoxes when it sets. The prospect of this alignment being a coincidence seems slim.
That's what I'm saying. That I couldn't remember that specific, but that's one of the ones I was talking about. How do they get these exact?
Right, and
that's not close.
Right,
it's an exact proportion.
And I feel like I said before, you have to have somebody who is just like we have like contractors, or we have like what are they called? What do you call like a person that like that draws up like a design? An architect. You got an architect that has spent years like honing his craft, like able to build this and know how it's all done. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they have like some sort of like celestial advisor who is like we have a team of people potentially, maybe not, of like builders and foremen and all that kind of stuff. And you got the celestial guy's like, no, it has to be like this because twice a year the sun's going to be like that.
So the Pharaoh comes to you tomorrow and he says, okay, look, you're going to be the Egyptian architect and you're going to take credit for these pyramids here, and we're going to write you in history, okay? Wait, no.
Obviously,
that's obviously what happened.
Right. This is all for the service of the Pharaoh. But this is my job, and my job is
hieroglyphs and everything.
Yeah.
People were given credit for building the pyramids.
Yeah.
They obviously didn't build them, so somebody took credit for a whole bunch of shit that they didn't do, including the pharaohs.
Yeah.
But they were gods.
Well, yeah. The question is, if I find it strange that nobody, because all pharaohs thought they were basically deities for all intents and purposes. Why there wasn't any other attempt beyond the Great Sphinx to build any other monuments?
Right.
You think about that.
Yeah.
It just stopped, which led me to believe that they basically took an existing structure.
Well, it's like,
did what they did.
Everybody got credit for building something, but it seems to me more like they really got credit for uncovering something.
Right.
Ooh.
And then prettying up the face.
And then, yeah.
And
so, we found this. Okay, I built it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what they did.
Because it would take, even in today's society, do you know how long it would take to uncover a pyramid? Multi-hundred feet high and really?
Yeah, I when people say that somehow these people were able to do all, I'm kind of shaking my head a little bit, and I go, I think there's a little bit more going on there than what. I know you're trying to make the story fit.
Yeah.
But
I also understand where those people come from, because then it starts to very quickly get into like alien territory. It gets hard to, because I feel like I'm in that middle ground too, where I'm like, I believe it's probably older. Do I believe that aliens? That's where I get my skepticism comes in.
But what if it's a future person going, okay, look, let's go back in the past and screw with everybody. Let's go teach these guys how to do this, and then because we know 15,000 years after they build it, it's going to be wiped out, and they got to start over. So let's go back and screw with some people.
There's plenty of cultures in their sacred text that that believe that, as I said, these things come in cycles, and there will be another cycle, and we will be destroyed and rebuilt.
That's what I'm talking about. Even my brother was talking about those 15 to 20,000 year cycles have been proven in the Earth core samples of the ice and the Earth and everything else. The radiation levels of some of these solar events are still there, and they can see it. I wish I could call him so he could talk. I don't even remember even having that conversation.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, it's
fascinating.
You
stuff.
can really look. I would love, and I personally think, as I said, I remember them saying that there was a chamber under the paw. We've talked about a Hall of Records. Supposedly that's where the evidence for the lost city of Atlantis is. We've all heard of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, or Thoth, or however it's pronounced. I'm a firm believer a lot of these Egyptian deities that the Egyptians deified were actually people of this earlier advanced culture. And because they knew so much, they looked like gods.
Right.
They looked like gods because they would be gods to them. How could you? You know all this advanced stuff. You're doing things that I can't even comprehend. You know, to them, they would be deities.
Well, think about, what was it? You said the Homo erectus possibly mated with Homo sapiens. Even that right there, just brain development right there. What did the Homo erectus think of the Homo sapiens? You know, well,
I mean, at some point, the Neanderthal died off.
Yeah.
And all that was left is I believe it was Neanderthal, then Cro-Magnon, and would be the modern day human. I believe that's kind of being challenged a little bit.
Right.
On that. I mean, the whole evolutionary thing, I think, is somewhat speculation too.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of holes in the whole evolutionary thought how Darwin came up with that and all that. I'm not saying evolution doesn't take place, but it doesn't. There's a lot of things it doesn't explain at all, and I think a lot of people kind of dump. Oh, it's evolution. Well, it's a little bit more involved than that, I think, than just.
And then there's these huge spikes in evolution too. Where did the spikes come from? Was there help?
Or it's like you said, there's just natural cycles. Like I mean, you know, like just like the Earth, maybe with evolution, there's just natural waves of things happening.
I mean, Ian, you say you don't like get into the alien thing,
right.
And look, I get it,
right,
because you want to have the conversation of what the evidence right now is showing that the conventional Egyptologists and geology will say it's this. Well, new evidence come out. Well, maybe it's more than that.
Right.
Okay. Now we may need to stretch our idea of what.
Right.
Okay. If there is an advanced culture, when did it evolve? How did it? And then, of course, what happened to it?
Right.
Now that gets into this idea of cyclical disasters, and then that frightens people. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Because the idea that we can get wiped out, but Earth just keeps on going on,
And just for the record, you said Ian doesn't like to talk about the alien thing, but we proved in a past episode, I think it was our third or fourth episode talking about aliens. We actually proved that Ian does like to get into the alien subject on various
that
levels.
was before my time here.
Yes, that was with X-Men.
But I do remember hearing about that kind of stuff. So, Ian, I'm going to protect you on that. Since I'm going to leave that to Stone. He can do that.
For me, it's like I said, I'm always of the mind that, especially in this stuff, in this field where I have no scholarly experience, I don't know any of that kind of stuff. I'm always down to be wrong. I'm always down to be proven that there was aliens that came down and kickstarted a group of people that were able to jumpstart into this next level of evolution like that. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but also crazy things I feel like happen. We're talking about the fact that the Sphinx is potentially thousands of years older than it actually is, and I'm and at that point, there's enough, I think, a little bit of evidence here and there that I'm like, it's pretty convincing, at least, to some little bit for me, at least.
Just our simple math of the
Right.
the erosion.
Yeah.
Well, to me,
just that simple
to
math
me,
right there
to
almost
me, just
proves
the
it.
idea that they have now found other structures
Right. And I think
that date to this period lends credence that there had to be somebody to be able to build this.
And the similarities between those structures on opposite points of the planet too.
I think it's great because I think at least, like you said, I think there are certain people that don't want to open the conversation up to talk about that, and I think this is cool because I think we're starting to open up the conversation. At least even just here,
exactly.
If this could reach people that could also open that conversation up to just talk about it some more, and let's say hypothetically the world there was a civilization, like then what could that lead to then us discovering about other parts of our history or other parts of
well, I mean, think about it.
So.
Think about it. We got pyramids in Egypt and we got pyramids in South America.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Isn't there a pyramid in North America too
Yeah.
that they're talking about? There's pyramids everywhere.
I mean, the thing is, how did this happen?
And may I
without
add,
any cross contact of cultures that may have lived, which entailed that they had to get to a point where they can at least cross and circumvent the globe.
let me add how many pyramids are there that we don't know about it because the waters rose 400 feet.
That's right.
Yep.
There could be more pyramids that we don't know.
Some say there are pyramids in Antarctica.
Oh, that's a big topic.
Uh-oh.
Huge
There's
topic.
pyramids there.
Oh, we talked about that.
Yes.
We talked about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yes.
We talked, and I saw the picture of it. And I was like, that looks an awful lot like a pyramid.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
That's
that's
funny,
what I'm
yeah.
saying. So
I forgot about that.
I find it funny, and then we talked about another episode with Nikola Tesla and
Yeah.
what he believed the pyramids were built for.
Yeah.
They were built for energy.
And they found battery parts in the pyramids.
So I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Not a triple A, double A,
right.
big large jar canisters.
I think people when people think of, and this is the problem with trying to explain an advanced culture. All right, they're going to think advanced. In their brain, they think of our culture. Maybe that culture evolved differently. Maybe it found other ways to generate power
Right.
that didn't involve burning fossil fuels.
Yeah,
Maybe they use other things. We don't know. But as I said, within a span of 6,000-7,000 years, most of that would be completely gone, especially if it's buried underneath the ocean.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And it's buried under how much silt
Yeah.
right.
that's down there,
Right.
over time. So I'm
Interesting conversation. It's fun.
I think people need to look.
Yeah.
I think they need to look closely at this, people.
That's cool stuff.
Don't just accept what they tell you.
Think while it's still legal.
Uh-oh. Yes. So with that being said, I'm excited for also, I think you kind of teased it before, we got a special guest coming in for our next episode. And then I think hopefully we're going to, I kind of threw out last week that we kind of talk about some of these more interesting off the wall topics. I think we want to touch on Nostradamus a little bit. We want to talk about a book called Chariots of the Gods that you had mentioned. So
That's going to be good.
Yes.
I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be some fun ones and some kind of interesting, kind of speculative type episodes.
That kind of ties right into
yeah,
what we're talking
exactly.
about now
So
a little bit.
It's going to be fun. So just keep a lookout for those. But also, if you're looking to get in touch with us, we have a Facebook page /Retrospect Pod, or you can email us, getoffendedtogether@gmail.com as well. We also got, I've kind of been talking recently about the YouTube channel. Go to the little search bar and type in @Retrospect Pod, and you can find the YouTube channel as well in case you want to, listen or watch there, or leave a comment there. Obviously, you can also reach out to us that way and comment on video, all that stuff. But anyways, until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. You're the best. Peace.